This is Not Another Church Podcast with your host, Pastor Tom.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody to Not Another Church Podcast, and we're going to continue the conversation about child rearing. And last week, Donna and Brian and I talked about the baby years, and so today we are going to be talking about the toddler years. And so we brought in some special guests. One of the special guests is Ann Harrison, my wife, who has raised 5 toddlers. And say you have to speak.
Okay, I will.
So don't be that person who looks at me and shakes your head.
I'm happy to be here.
And we have Allison Barkley. Now tell me your kids' names and ages.
Okay, I have 4. I have Avery, who is 10. Then I have Ansley, she is 4. And I have twins that are Asher and Ann Reese, and they are 3. So the twins and Ansley, they are 13 months apart.
So you are living toddler world. So we have an expert guest.
That's
right.
That's right. I am in the thick of it right now.
So I think one of the things about the toddler years that's hard as we get started is this book of Psalms calls children a gift from the Lord. And all of a sudden, these precious little babies that just sat there in the crib and cooed and were so sweet, and they really didn't do a whole lot other than sleep and poop, now all of a sudden become spawn from hell. And
oh, my gosh.
I don't know if it's that bad. Well, some days maybe, but not that bad.
I'll say that this is actually probably my favorite stage. I mean, I love a good toddler. I mean, a bad toddler even. I do. I love toddlers.
Well, they get into everything. We've even in our society have the term baby proofing a house.
Yes.
They get into everything. In fact, it amazed me the way that our toddlers could get into things. I will never forget William at about 2. Emily and Molly had a fish tank that had these goldfish that were bigger than the bowl, and it was on top of a chest of drawers that was about my chest height. And he had pulled the drawers out in a perfect stair-step pattern so that he could walk up to the top. And I walked in, and he has his arm in the fish bowl chasing fish around. And when I'm like, William, what are you doing? And he looks at me like, what?
What's the problem?
Don't we do this every day? And so just the ingenuity, the very fact that they're humans, so they have intelligence. They're humans, so they're wicked. They want to do what they want to do. All of that complication and the fact that now they have their own will. Yes. You know, as babies, you pick them up and put them where they want to go, and they just ride, right? You put them in their pumpkin, they're in the car, maybe they're cry, but now all of a sudden, I would say each one of our 5 children in the top 10 words that were their first words was no.
Yeah, no.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
So,
for sure.
Okay, so we've set the stage. We're going to talk about toddlers, and the purpose of this podcast is to help parents who are there now. Mm-hmm. So I think that Ann and I can bring to the table, it doesn't last forever. It will end.
And I'm here to tell you, it feels like it's going to last forever.
So I've already started with a William story. So tell us one of your funny toddler stories.
Oh, my stars. There are so many. Just the fact that I have the 3 that are so close together, they are into something together all the time. You know, there are some great days, you know, when they're sweet. Oh my goodness, they're sweet. A funny thing was the other day, I don't know why I've never bought these, but, you know, I had went into Dollar General before, you know, I had surgery the other day, and I went in to prepare to be down for the count for a few days, and I came across, you know, the big jug of cheese balls, and I don't know why I've never bought them.
Oh, I love those.
We love those. We got them at Sam's, like the massive thing.
Y'all have never bought them, and so I thought,
they're awesome.
And I love them. My kids like them because they've had them at church, they've had them at friends' houses, you know, things like that. But I've just never bought a big jug. Well, I thought, this will be a treat because, you know, a new snack is like a big deal. So I put them in the pantry, and the other day, this was before my surgery.
I'm literally salivating right now.
You didn't bring any for Tom?
I know, right?
On the way home, we're stopping by Dollar General.
Well, it was funny because I was digging through trying to find him a snack, and I thought, oh, I forgot I bought these. So I pulled out the big jug, and I was like, hey, guys, I got you a surprise. And I pulled it out, and I was like, look what I got. And y'all, they were jumping up and down. They were so excited you would have thought it was Christmas morning. So excited that Asher and Ann Reese ran up to each other, hugged, and gave each other a big old kiss on the mouth. They were so excited over these cheese balls. And of course, I was like, oh my goodness, my babies, they're so sweet, But then it can be like 5 minutes later, and they're ready to rip each other's heads off just over somebody taking a book
Mine.
that they had and put down 3 seconds before that they had no interest in, but yet they were playing with it,
Right.
an hour ago, and then the other one had grabbed it. So there's a sweet, sweet, sweet moments, but then, what can break loose over something so simple as a book or a toy or, just somebody or what we could, they always, that was my spot. That was my spot. If somebody sits down in their seat on, now keep in mind we have a huge sectional and a recliner sitting in our living room, but there's always, that's my spot. There's
Well, I
my
hate
spot.
to tell you
Yeah, I was
this,
gonna
but
say the
it
same thing.
continues. William is 18. He sits in that section over there that we made the mask-only section.
Yes.
And all of his buddies have moved to the next section, and there's my son with his mask on. He's not moving. That's my seat, Mama.
That's my
I've been
spot.
sitting in that seat for years. I'm like, son,
I love it.
are you an old man? What's wrong
Love
with
it.
you?
Oh, yes.
Well,
That story, I'm sorry.
Oh,
That
go ahead.
story, I thought you were going to end it with they dumped all the cheese balls out and there was
I'm
orange
sure,
all over your house.
Oh, I'm sure it's coming. I mean, there's been situations like that. There has been, not long ago, I had walked out of the room for not 5 minutes, and when I came back in, they had come up and somehow found just the classic writing on the walls. In our foyer, they had found some crayons and just took it upon themselves to just draw us some art right there, right when you walk in our house. And we had a little artwork here and there, and I was still finding like little pieces of art in the hallway like a week later where they had drawn something, and I was like, how did I miss this? And then another week later, here was another spot, and they had all done it on that one day, but they had there's so many of them. Sometimes it's hard to keep up with,
It is.
all the things that they get into at one time.
And the Bible says in Romans chapter 3 that there's none righteous, no, not one. No one understands, no one seeks for God. They've all turned aside. Together they've become worthless. No one does good, no, not one. So that is the human condition, and that is what they're brought. In fact, in Islamic theology, they teach that babies, when they're born, are perfect, and that sin is learned behavior. And I don't know how anyone who has reared children can believe that. Because kids will immediately try to exert their will at such a young age and deceive, lie. There are hundreds of stories of Ann's making a birthday cake for one kid, and she leaves the room and comes back, and there's a big handful missing. And
I have a funny story about Ansley with that one.
And she's like looking at this child who's covered in chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
Did you eat the cake? No. I was just over here praying for you, Mom. Are you sure you didn't eat the cake? Because there's chocolate all over the child. No. Why would you accuse me of this thing? Why would you do this? And so at an early age, we see sin and sin's tendencies, which leads us to parenting. One of the things that we have got to do as parents is begin the process of teaching them that there are authorities in their life that have the right to say, nope, you're not going to act that way. Because if we as parents don't instill that, then they're not going to follow after God when He says you can't do this or you can't do that. So I think that it's really important as parents, and it's before you have kids, you hear that and you go, oh yeah, sure, yeah, I'll do that. It's so much easier just to ignore it.
Yes, it
It
is.
is.
I think
Oh,
a big part of parenting that I didn't realize before we had children was that it's like me having self-control, me doing these, you get tired.
Oh, my
Like,
goodness, do
you're
you
like,
ever.
don't do that. Don't do that. Stop doing that. Be nice to your
Yes.
sister. Be nice. And then by 4 o'clock, you're like, oh my goodness.
That was
what I was and you
telling my
got to
mother the
have
other
that
day.
self-control to continue to train them instead of going, forget it, I'm just going to walk away and ignore it.
That's exactly what I was telling Mom the other day. And see, y'all have got 5, we've got 4. And I told Mother, I said, it feels like I'm just constantly, from the second I get up until the second I go to bed, and I want to pick and choose my battles. You know, you hear that saying, you pick and choose your battles, because I feel like if I don't, you know, I'm constantly, no, don't do this. No, don't hit him. No, don't say that. No, don't, you know, no, constantly all day long, because I have 4 kids. And if one's not doing something, it's another one. And then, or it's the other one, or it's the other one, or it's the other one. So every time I turn around, I'm going to be yelling or no, and it's all day long. But then if I pick and choose that,
but see, I think
I'm turning the blind eye on something.
It's something that you have to remind yourself that it's a stage.
Right.
You know, that in those baby, well, not really baby, but as they begin to be toddlers and then they get like when towards kindergarten-ish and first grade, those years are foundational years.
Right.
Where you're building a foundation and you're instilling in them how to act, how not to act, how to love, how to be kind, how to be routines, behaviors, like, you know, training them on right and wrong and how to do things and how to have routines and those kinds of things. And so that's your foundation. And that part is very difficult on mom and dad because it's exhausting. And it is. You are doing it from the minute you get up to the minute you go to bed, because once they go to bed, you try to get it in the bed and then they come and wake you up.
Exactly.
You know?
Mama, can I have a glass of water?
Exactly.
But those are the foundation. That's the foundation. It's only a season. You're going to move into another season, as you know.
Right, with Avery.
With Avery, you've already seen that.
It's gotten a lot easier.
And you're going to get let up for air a little bit.
Right.
You know.
And I think one of the cures for that feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of this, is not necessarily turning a blind eye to things, but keeping things in perspective. And through our life, God's always brought people into our lives where, I remember one time Emily carved the name of a dog on a piece of furniture.
Of all things.
I know.
And it, you know, I'm
Don't you wish it
livid.
was a Bible verse or something?
Right.
Not the name of the dog.
It's a dog.
No, it's a dog's name. And so I was livid because in my mind, you know, this is destructive. And it needed to be dealt with. She definitely needed to be punished. But we had some friends when we were on the mission field who actually said, well, that someday you'll cherish where that carving is. Right. And that's just part of that piece of furniture's life, that happened. And so that kind of perspective. And for me, that was put into perspective. And I don't think that they would mind. We have a family here at North Glencoe who lost a son at 16. And a few years after he passed, they were moving some furniture in their house. And they found behind a couch where Hunter had drawn on the wall.
Oh, goodness.
And he had actually moved the furniture to hide.
To cover it up.
And when they found it in that phase of their life, it was precious, and they actually framed it or put a frame around it.
I was about to say that would have been something that I would have
didn't
wanted
know
to
that.
do. That's perfect.
I would have been just in tears.
Oh, a mess.
So keeping perspective. Certainly we correct our kids. It's important for us to teach our children. We don't let them be wantonly destructive. But we have to keep in perspective what we said last week, which is the days are long, but the years are short. That all of this is soon going to pass. And now that doesn't help you if you're a mom or you're a dad and it's 9:30 at night and you're sitting there. I remember, it seems like the years of laying in the bed with a child, trying to be perfectly still.
Yes, and sneak out of the room.
Oh, yeah. Basically like rolling yourself at one point in time. Yes, rolling out of the room, trying to keep the floor from cracking. Yes.
Like you think you're out of the room, and then they're like, Mama! And you're like, oh.
I mean, we know the exact spots on our floor that creak. So you don't step on those spots.
You have them marked with
Remember those when they're teenagers.
I know, right?
That's hilarious.
Yes. And
it's
if
like a minefield. You know, you don't step on those little.
If you ever get behind in your prayer life, those nights, oh Lord, oh please, oh please, oh please, oh please, let them sleep.
I know.
Yes.
I know. But it's interesting because when you're in the middle of that, like I remember being in that and just being so tired and so And I loved it. I loved every minute of them being little. Like, I loved it.
Oh,
I
yeah.
loved carrying them around. I loved playing with them. I loved
Yes.
reading to them at night. I even loved going to the grocery store with them. I was the crazy woman who had all these kids hanging out of the buggy.
Oh, yeah.
you
People
know.
asking questions.
And, yeah,
They'll
people
ask,
are like,
all yours?
You can
Are they
say
all
you
yours?
love it.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
I'm gonna
Get that all the time.
have to throw a flag here because
no, you're not.
I remember the complaints, and I remember you threatening to get a T-shirt printed up that said, "Yes, I know how many. Yes, I know what causes this.
Yes, those are all the questions that you get.
That's right.
Yes, they're all
We
mine."
look
Yes.
back and we love it. But hey, there are those days though where you're tired and you don't like it so much.
It is true. But for the most part, it's pretty
It's
fond
fun.
memories. And I love that, they could go and play with each other. I liked having them close together and everything. It was very different when we had Ruthie because she was so much farther away in age than the other, so it was weird. But it was different raising for her, I guess. But what was I going to say? I've lost my train of thought now. We got off on that.
Yeah, we were talking about the grocery store. You liked
liked
it,
taking them to the
which
grocery
is
No, it was before that.
people. That's a lie.
I didn't have a choice. You were always at work and a lot of times out of town. And so I didn't really, and we didn't have grandparents nearby. My mom's in Virginia.
Right.
And Tom's parents were here. And when our kids were little, mostly lived in Coleman. So they were an hour away. So I didn't have any choices.
You're on your own.
Yeah, I was on my own. But I don't know. I'll come back to it.
You liked having them little. You liked having.
Yes,
You liked
but
them
I
being
will
little.
say that you've got to be intentional with what you do in those little years because you truly are sowing what you're about to reap.
Right.
And once they get into those older years, those teenage years, now middle school, it's bad for everybody. Let's
Right.
just put it
All
that
right,
way.
we're going to have a
But
whole podcast
I
on middle
know.
school years. So
But I'm
don't-
just
don't get
saying
there.
that
I'm gonna
when
have
they're
to keep
little-
I'm gonna have to record that and keep that one saved on my phone. I
Right.
think
It's
the middle school
important.
years because Avery's hitting that one. So.
Yeah. I'm just trying to say it's important
It
to
is.
really do a lot of intentional parenting and
Right.
really think through what are you aiming for? What are your what do you want? What character qualities maybe you want in your kids when they get older?
And that really is important because people forget that they're literally creating what that child is going to be when they're a
Right.
teenager.
And see, that's what I worry about because then I think to myself sometimes, I feel like all I do with me having so many little ones and having to discipline all day long because I have 2 3-year-olds and 1 4-year-old that are into things all day long,
Right.
whether they're fighting with each other, whether they're into something, whether they're, most of the time they're just fussing a lot of the time because they're little,
Right. They
And
just do
one
that.
has taken a toy from the other one, and or they've taken a bite of the other one's snack, or they're sitting in the other one's spot.
Some
I
of
feel
those
like a
cheesy
lot of-
poofs have been stolen.
I feel like I'm yelling the majority of the day, and I try not to yell, but it ends up turning into yells is what I feel like I do sometimes. And I wonder, am I setting them up to be that type of person that just yells all the time? Because I don't want that to be the case.
Right.
And that's what worries me.
But I think you've thought of that.
Right,
And
right.
you can't kill yourself with the mommy guilt.
Right. Yeah, it
So
turns into mommy guilt. Exactly.
I think that happens. I mean, and obviously you think about it. You try not to do that, but at the same time, they need to listen to you.
Exactly. Oh yeah. And sometimes that's the only way you can get them to, and
Yeah.
they're yelling as loud as they can. But y'all, it's so fun too because now I've seen them from where they're babies, especially the twins. Everybody, a twin has this. Twins have
Yeah.
these special bonds. They're fraternal. We've got boy-girl twins, and they still have a sweet bond. They still love each other and play together. But from babies, obviously, as babies, they don't play together. They just
Right.
lay there and look at each other most of the time. But now that they're older and toddlers, they really do just connect and they play together and they'll look at each other. They'll say, "You're my best friend, and Reese, you're my best friend," or "You're my
sweet.
best friend, Reese." That's what he calls her. And she'll say, "You're my best friend, Ashel." And he'll say, "You're all my best friends," and that's how he'll say it. And he'll go through all, Avery and Ansley, and he'll call everybody out. And they're so sweet. They'll play together so good. Now I'm losing my train of thought, but it's fun watching them now interact together and
Right.
play together. I was going somewhere with that, and I'm like you now. I've lost my train of thought now.
See, and so parenting does. Statistically, it's been proven that for every child you lose like 30 IQ points.
So me and
Totally.
Allison,
We're
we got
there.
nothing.
Yeah, we have nothing. We're there. You have to help us out.
I know. We've forgotten it all.
So, and I think too, it's important to, as a way to fight that feeling of all I'm doing is yelling at my kids, is to be proactive in making sure that you have things planned for them to do. I'm not saying that you're a substitute teacher all day, but you do things with them, and it's not just free range.
Exactly.
Right.
And I
Schedules.
will say too, I've always been, oh my goodness, I'm like the schedule routine Nazi. I mean, to the extent where it's annoying, and I always have been, even as newborns. I was listening to y'all's podcast from last week, and Donna was talking about routines and how she would, everything revolves around that nap time when they're babies and things like that, and that's how I was, if we went anywhere, we had to be home like 20 minutes before nap time so I could make sure they had a diaper change, and, we would calm down. I mean, everything revolved around those nap times. And I remember on Sundays, and it still is, Sundays were the worst day of the week because your nap times were off. Your whole routine is off on Sundays because it was church day.
Right.
So they were always ill on church days, and especially in our case, because, I've always either sang in the choir or on the praise team or praise band. So we were always here really early.
Yeah.
And then either we would come back later or we would be here and then Wednesdays were always rough because we would stay later on, for choir. So they would go down for, I know, always throws a kink in everything, But, it was those were the 2 days that their routines were so totally off. But Sundays were always terrible because their naps were thrown, and that, lunch, they would never eat anything because you're trying to keep, they'll eat snack during church or whatever.
I was going to say, the reason they're not eating anything at lunch because all the old men have given them candy all day.
Yes.
Goldfish in the nursery.
But I'm such a routine Nazi. And now that, I've been homeschooling the kids. I chose to homeschool this year. And so I've got Avery that I'm homeschooling, and Ansley was supposed to start preschool, and I chose to do preschool with her at home. And so now, like, the first half of our day is totally devoted to school.
Right.
And so I will say, which we've always been, we're still routined, even though, they still take a nap. No, Avery doesn't, but the babies do. And we still everything revolves around that afternoon nap, even for the toddlers. But the mornings, now that it's even more so structured, our days have gotten a lot easier just from that, because they expect to do, Mommy, we do school today?
Yeah.
We do school today, and they know, and it's funny because we start with like a calendar time, and they'll say, Ansley will go, I don't like calendar. Do we have to do calendar today? For some reason, she hates to do calendar, and, but it's that routine, but they know that's what they do. That's what we're supposed to do. They know they practice writing their name, and that's what comes next. And it's just so amazing, that sense of security and how much better the day goes, and how much happier they are, the less fighting they have, because they're more entertained. I have things for them to do, things that were planned out, things, we have a snack. And we even did this, though, before we started school. Their snack time in the mornings was at 10 o'clock every day. And they know that that's when it's snack time, and it's just like clockwork, There's so much, things do go a lot better when you have things planned for them to do, and they have something to do for themselves.
One thing that Tom and I talked about before today when we came here was that we knew you're staying home. I stayed home for a long time. Obviously, I don't anymore. My kids are older, but and so we also didn't want to leave out those mamas that are working. But I do think that those of the moms that are working all day, trying to get the kids out the door in the morning, they're coming home, they're tired, the kids are tired, they've got dinner, they've got baths, they've got homework, they've got all the things. I think that, they've really got it tough.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that a lot of this stuff kind of translates anyway, because I think if you're able to be disciplined enough to have some sort of schedule, and most people have to.
Oh, yeah.
You've got to, then that kind of helps with the routine, with the kids, with your own sanity, and it gives you some quality time with your kids, even though, it may look a little bit different.
I can remember when, I didn't start staying home with the kids until I had the twins.
Yeah.
I was still teaching I was pregnant with the twins. So my last year of teaching was right until was the May before I had the twins in July. And I can remember my mother kept Ansley for me while I taught because Ansley wasn't even a year old yet. And I can remember I would go and pick Ansley up, and it's something about, I don't know if y'all's kids were this way, but there's something about that stretch from, I would say, about 4 or 5 o'clock to bedtime where it's been all of my kids. I don't know if your kids were like that, but it's just like their whole temperament changes. I don't know if it's just they know bedtime's coming or if they're hungry because it's almost supper time, but it just seemed like it didn't matter if they had a good nap or a bad nap. It just seemed like they weren't as happy. As the rest of the day.
I'm not happy from 7 o'clock at night until.
I know, and I can remember going to pick Ansley up for Moms, or Sean would go and pick up, Ansley for Moms, and then we would come home and I would fix our supper. It was always a rush to fix supper, do homework with Avery.
Right.
And I remember Ansley would just be so ill, up until bedtime. And I can remember calling Mom and I would think, I only get her, I would be crying, I only get her for a good 4 hours out of the day. And, 2 of those hours she's screaming. I just don't understand, and that was always one of the biggest struggles because I just felt like, my time with her was always the rushed time,
Right.
I'm rushing to get her ready and out the door because I have to be at work. And then when I come in, I'm having to do homework with the oldest one. I'm having to fix our supper and I'm having to bathe her. And there's never any just downtime to where I can sit and enjoy my child.
Right.
Because I've got to make sure I get her in the bed because we've got to get up and start all over
right
in the morning. So I'm sure that's a struggle for some of the
sure.
working moms.
I think that maybe their best bet is the weekends.
The weekends.
Well,
You're just
and
hanging in there till that weekend.
Recognizing that. So yes, everything's harem scared. You pick the kids up after work. You get home. You make supper, and then immediately after supper, especially if the older kids are going to sports and dad's going to sports.
That was before that started for us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got people coming and going. Just live where you are.
Right.
And I'm preaching to myself here. This is one of the things that I've really struggled with that the Holy Spirit convicted me of is that stop thinking about we've got to get this done so that this next thing can happen and focus on the fact that right now you're sitting there with your child. They may be in a seat while you're cooking, but that's your opportunity to try to talk to them, because sometimes you can have a really fascinating, silly conversation with a child to really get an idea, and it's those moments while you're sitting there making supper and they're eating a snack where you can talk, you can communicate, you can get to know them, and it's hard. It would be so hard to only have those hours, because I remember we had 2 kids in particular, and I won't say their names to embarrass them, but if you want to know, just call me at the church, I'll tell you. But it seemed like from the moment we finished supper until they went to sleep, it was a battle. It was like a constant. It was like, get in the bathtub now. I mean, seriously, get in the bathtub. Then they would get out of the bathtub. Did you not bathe?
Well, that was when they got a little bit older. You're getting out of the toddler years.
Oh, that's true. That's right.
Because toddler years, I was helping them. We were playing in the bathtub for hours on end.
Right.
That's right.
Well, that was the only time. That was kind of like Ansley. That was the only time Ansley was ever happy in that time, like the baby years, I guess I should say, was when she was in the bathtub.
Well, then
from
have
that
those
time,
long
exactly.
bathtub
Yeah,
times.
and would
I
have,
mean,
and we had some serious bathtub toys.
I'm into the
Oh, yeah.
bathtub toys. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ann's mom had gotten us the colors that you could color on the bathtub with.
Yes.
We had
Paint.
Naked Baby.
Yeah, we had a baby that we called Naked Baby because
Love
she
it.
was like a rubber baby, and she was always in the bathtub, right?
Right,
And so what the girls did, because we've got 4 girls, right?
Right.
So what they didn't know was that every so often I would go to Walmart and Tom would keep the kids, and I'd buy a new Naked
Naked
Baby,
Baby.
and I'd take all her clothes off
And put her
and
in
then
there.
put her in there and take the other one, go sneak her in the trash can.
Because it would get all
it was
moldy
nasty.
inside.
Yes,
Yes.
nasty.
Yes, Naked Baby was rubber, and you could suck water up in her by squeezing her and then make her spit across the
So we've
bathtub.
had a bunch of Naked Babies.
That's hilarious. The things we do, y'all. The things we do to keep these kids happy.
I know. They
But, you know,
were
and
shocked to
that's-
find that out.
That's so true, though, as you were saying, those little times. I need to do a better job of like living in
the
that
moment.
moment because I'm the world's worst of trying to think too far ahead of what's,
Right.
I'm such a planner. It's a good quality to have, but oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It can be such a downfall because, and I know Sean Sean will back me up and say, yes, it's a downfall, because I
Yeah.
can nearly drive him crazy going, okay, we've got to get this together,
Yeah.
because I have to have everything planned out, and I need to do such a better job of just living in that moment. And, like you said, some of the best conversations and little talks you can have are with your kids. And those are the kind of things that your kids will remember, or those little
Right.
spur of the moment, those little things. Like the other night, all the kids had gotten in the bed, and I don't know why I was craving a milkshake. I wanted a milkshake. It was right after my surgery. I wanted a milkshake so bad. We did not have any kind of ice cream in the house. We're big Bluebell eaters, and we had not one thing of Bluebell in our house.
This episode is brought to you by the fine folks
I
of
know,
Bluebell.
right? And Sean went and got Avery, and she said, well, I've already had my shower. She said, I'm in my pajamas. And he said, well, just come on, let's go. You don't have to even get out of the car. And he threw her in the car, and they drove up to the Hoax Bluff Sonic and got
Aw,
her a
that was
milkshake. And it was like 9:00 at night, And of
Yeah.
course, but that's the things that she'll look back on.
Yeah.
And it was just her and her daddy. They drove up to Sonic, got a milkshake. She was in her pajamas,
Yeah.
and they drove home.
Kids
and
love that stuff.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff you think about.
That brings actually the next point in my notes, which is one of our primary jobs at this time is to build memories in your kids' lives.
Right.
And to me, it's funny how now that my kids are older, the things that are important and special memories to them. So we have a thing that we do every year on Christmas Eve, that we get in the car, and we have to have our pajamas on, much to Anne's chagrin, because she's like, what if
Yeah.
we have a flat tire? So
I have a struggle with
Oh,
that.
yeah.
I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to
You
be
wanna
caught on
be
the side of the
put
road in my
together.
pajamas,
So
Oh, yeah.
we wear
I would be the
pajamas,
same way.
we eat popcorn, have hot chocolate, and we just drive around and look at tacky lights.
Right.
And-
we used to do that when I was a kid.
There's
We
not as
loved
many
looking-
anymore.
No, we would drive up Keysburg. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Do y'all remember when Keysburg Road was like the place to go?
There's still a couple cool houses.
Right. Yeah, they had the music going. Oh my goodness, we loved it.
So how that came about was just, we, like you said, the kids had already gotten ready for bed. We figured they would fall asleep in the car, so they were in their PJs. And now that they're in their 20s, they still it's
about
an
it.
important
We
thing
still
to them.
do it.
We
Yeah.
still
Oh,
do
yeah.
it. So Molly comes back from Jacksonville. The kids all pile in the car in their pajamas, and they fight with each other over, you got more
Who gets-
popcorn than I do. Just like they did when they were little.
We have to have more
well,
popcorn.
it wouldn't be the same if they didn't do it.
I
You'd
know.
probably miss it if you didn't hear the fighting over the popcorn.
And so those little things that as adults we think are just silly, those are everything
stands
to a
out.
kid. Because think about when you were a kid, that's the special times, the times when you pretended to still be asleep so your dad would carry you into the house. Those moments, your job as a parent is to discipline your child, to rear them in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, of course, but also to create in them happiness and joy and fond memories, and so that your kids can look back on their childhood with a smile.
Yeah. Yeah, that brings me to a point that we were talking about offline here about being intentional about things
Right.
and thinking about that. So like with the traditions, some of them we like just kind of sat down and we're like, okay, we need to do some special stuff every
Right.
year, and so we kind of thought through it. You don't always have to do that. Sometimes they come about.
Right.
But another thing that we did, I think we did this before we had children, actually. We were married almost 6 years before we had Emily. So we had plenty of time to talk about it.
Right.
But we talked about kind of what, not what we wanted our children to be as far as an astronaut and a doctor and whatever, but just kind of like, what are we aiming for here? Because if you don't aim for something, you're not going to hit it.
No, you are going to hit it. If you aim for nothing, you're guaranteed to hit it.
So we kind of came up with some foundational things that we thought like, okay, they're gonna be born and they're gonna be cute, but let's not just wing it the whole time for the
Right.
next 18 years. And so we thought about not what they wanted to be as far as, like I said, with like a job. We let them discover what they were good at. We let them try out a lot of things, and whatever they were good at, then we pursued those.
Right.
Obviously Molly's a musician and a
Right.
singer, and we tried that with Emily, and it wasn't her thing, and each child has their own
Little
gifts
niche.
that God has given them, so you got to help them find that. But we did think about, okay, when our kids are grown, we want to be friends with them. We want to love them and want to be around them. And as they're growing up, we want to be able to enjoy them. And so we want to make sure that we teach them discipline. We want them to be pleasant. We want them to be polite. We want them to treat other people kindly. We want them to know and love the Lord. Mm-hmm. And we realize that's a personal decision, but we want to create an environment to where they have every opportunity to make that decision, which you can't just willy-nilly do. Like you have to be intentional, and it's all the little small steps that you have to take and talk about that are going to lead up to the things that you're aiming for. Like, I remember when Emily was just little, like a year old, and I remember doing a quiet time one time and just really feeling convicted that it was important, because I guess I'd never thought about it before, first child and everything. It was important for me, even at that young age, to start getting her acquainted with spending some time with God every day. Mm-hmm. And so I started, we'd get up in the morning and, I'd give her a bottle or whatever and her little breakfast and stuff. And then we would, every morning about the same time, part of the routine, we'd read a little children's Bible. It wasn't anything, over her head. It was just a little Bible story.
The red dog.
And we do a little prayer, just a little short baby prayer, and even though she didn't get a ton out of it at that age, my goal,
introducing her to it.
Right, was to introduce her to this. And she hadn't committed her life to Christ at that point.
Right.
And so you could make the argument, well, that's something that you do after you know the Lord. But I wanted her to have that routine, that discipline, and know that was something to do.
Well, it's kind of like, I can remember, it's kind of like when my mother, I can remember being a kid, I cannot look back at any point in time. My mother played the piano from as far back as I can remember. She played the piano for church as I was growing up. That was how she served. That was what the Lord, that was her talent. That's her gift that He gave her. She played at every church we have ever been a part of. That's what she did. She just played, and I can remember being there on Wednesday nights, on Sunday mornings. I can remember being there sometimes on Thursday nights. I mean, and it didn't matter, and we would play there'd be times where she would threaten us within an inch of our life and tell us to sit and be still. We would laugh and call it the hairball. That was her clearing the throat, and if we heard that, we'd straighten up, sit up real big straight. We knew we were not doing what we were supposed to be doing. And we could hear it from up on the stage. We knew we watched her do that our entire lives. We knew that she served the Lord by being up on the stage and playing the piano, using her talent and her gift for Him.
What a good example.
And that's just what we did. And so we were there during church services. We were there for practices. We were there when we weren't supposed to, when nobody else was, for her to work and do what she was supposed to be doing. I say work. I mean, she was never paid for it. She just did it. And I remember she said she wanted to she's talked to us about it before. She wanted to set that example for us. She wanted us to see that that's what we do. We not worked our way into heaven, which you preach on that all the time. We were not brought up that way. We were taught the same thing. You don't work your way into heaven. That's not what you do. But you use your gifts and your talents for Him.
Right.
You serve Him. And that's what she did. She wanted us to see, this is how we worship. This is how we worship. This is how we serve. We worship Him. And that's what I've tried to do for the babies. I've sang as long as I can remember. I may not have always sang in a choir or on a praise team, but Mom put a microphone in our hands as soon as I can remember, as soon as I could talk. And me and my sisters, all three of us. And so I've tried to teach my children that just because just because we go to church, it's not something that you just show up on a Sunday and you sit and then you get up and you leave and you go home. We go to church, we worship, and we serve.
Right.
And I've told Sean when we had the kids that at the time I was singing on praise team, and we would have to be here at 8:00 in the morning. And I remember, I think it was Leah. She was doing the nursery at the time, and she always gets here early enough, so she's precious. So the kids can come in there, and they're not running around or too loud or whatever. And I would tell Sean, I would say, I'll send them in there to Leah for a little while, but I want them to come in there with us first, because unless they get too wild or too antsy, because I want them to be able to see this is what we do.
Absolutely.
You know, I want them to see that mommy's up here singing, not but to see mommy singing, but to see mommy's up here worshiping, mommy's up here serving the Lord. Mommy sings, and she's singing for the Lord. This is what we do. We're here early, not just to get here early. We're here early because we're doing what the Lord wants us to do. You know, we're serving, and so that's what I've tried to teach them. You know, we come early, so we practice. We come at a normal church time. We come on another night for practice, you know, and I want them to understand that early so that it's like a second nature to them.
Well, and also,
you know,
this becomes a second home for them.
Exactly.
They're very comfortable here. They're familiar with the building. They're familiar with the people. You know, they don't come in here and not know what to do. I mean, they know what's expected, what's not. They have friends here. They look forward to it. And it's something that they enjoy.
Right.
And I think that as adults, we forget how much they mimic us, how much they learn from our example, whether it be good or bad.
Right.
And then I hear people saying, well, you know, I've got a baby, or I've got little kids, or they're too loud, or they're whatever, or I'm so tired, or it's just easier for me to watch at home, or whatever. And that, you know, it doesn't make me mad or anything.
No.
It makes me sad.
It is. It's sad.
Because I think and I wouldn't really say this to them, but I think, you know, you're missing out. Your kids are missing out. Like, we're all human here. We're not perfect. So it's cool to drag your kids along, and they're going to act like kids. We get that. That's fine.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think this church is pretty laid back, especially with that stuff. I love that. I love that your mom gave you that example.
Now's the time. This toddler time. This is the time you start pushing it. You know, they start soaking it up, and this is the time they soak it in, and they just really just dig in. They dig into it, and they start singing it, and they start mimicking it, and it's so easy, like you said, where it's so easy to get in that rut.
Yeah.
You stay home that 1 week, and then it gets easier to stay home that next
I'm just going to watch the live stream.
Yeah, it's so easy. And that's what's so scary, that rut becomes the next week and the next week. Well, it's just so much easier. It's so much easier.
And you know what?
Because I've been there. Those babies, it's tough getting them all ready on a Sunday morning and out the door. You know,
it is. And you know,
but I don't want in that rut.
I think a lot of people don't realize that what goes on back here in Kid City is not babysitting.
No.
Like,
if you really want to get Donna hot, call it child care.
She is an excellent Bible teacher.
Our Kid City
and
is
so
fantastic.
Is Haley, and so are all the Sunday school
Leah,
teachers.
and the nursery's not just
and Lindsay
nursery.
And all those
I love that.
So
too.
this section is brought to you by the fine folks at North
Really,
Waco Baptist Church.
but they are. They're teaching
They're amazing.
the kids.
Yeah, our kids are amazing. Our kids have got the best. Our kids children's ministry has the best leadership.
Right.
They feed they are such good teachers. They feed our kids the word. I mean, every Sunday, every Wednesday night. It's not just a babysitter. You don't just go stick them in the nursery. Okay, see you.
All right,
see you
so
later.
let's sum up, because we need to start buttoning her down.
Wrap it up.
Real quickly, to sum it up, one is you have to live in the moment. You have to plan on what you want your kids to be, and then start working in that direction. You have to be intentional about the way you do things, and have fun as you're doing it. Remember, you guys use the term "mommy guilt," and we can do that through our Christian walk about anything. If I had, and so that's not what God has called us to live, and so just focus on showing the love of Christ to your children. And I want to close with this. I remember, Ann, really well, you and I sitting out on the patio at the farm, and you tearfully saying, I feel like I can't really do anything for the Lord right now because I've got these kids. I can't do anything beyond these kids. And to any moms or dads who are feeling that way, I want to remind you that the biggest mission field you've got, you're serving God as you rear those children. I know that it feels like they're never going to go to sleep. They're destroying my house. I'm never going to have any alone time with my spouse. On and on and on and on. Trust me, right now you're building believers who will be mighty warriors for God's kingdom. You're doing exactly what God's called you to do, and look at it that way.
Amen.
So I'm
When
looking
I
forward.
remind myself of that, I do a lot better too.
Yes.
I have to keep myself reminded of that they are who that's my
That's your mission
that's
field.
my mission field, my kids. Because when I
Yeah.
get in that rut, it's easy.
Yes.
It is easy.
And it doesn't feel particularly spiritual to clean somebody's hiney. I mean, that's just the
No.
reality.
No, but there's been Sundays I've been in that rut, and the Lord knows what we need, because you've either said it in Sunday school on a Sunday or in a sermon, and I have thought, He's right. They're my mission field, and I get a fresh, I'm totally refreshed, and here we go again.
And I think that the Lord's going to hold us responsible.
That
Whether
He is,
we were
yes.
faithful
Yes.
or we weren't.
Exactly.
All right. So in child rearing, go serve your king. Thank you for coming. And this has been the Toddler episode of Not Another Church Podcast. Look forward to talking to you next week.
This has been Not Another Church Podcast with your host, Pastor Tom. Thanks for listening, and go serve your king.